Hello and welcome to our podcast today, where we're going to discuss the future of B2B enterprise sales, specifically in the context of the new world of GenAI and Agentic AI. Today, I have the honor and privilege of speaking with two global industry thought leaders, Martyn Lewis, CEO and founder of Market Partners, and Andrew Fritz, CEO of Augment AI. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Great
Stu.
to be here.
Great to have you. Honestly, it's a privilege. All right, quick introductions. Martyn Lewis has decades of experience in sales, sales management, and executive management. And sorry for using the word decades there, Martyn, but Martyn founded Market Partners 30 years ago, has worked with a broad spectrum of companies, including some of the world's largest, and maybe even the world's largest, helping them with go-to-market strategies and sales approaches. He is a respected and sought-after keynote speaker, often featured at the Strategic Account Management Association, SAMA, at their annual conference. He is also the author of the acclaimed book, How Customers Buy and Why They Don't, where Martyn expertly lays out the results of a decade of customer buying journey research. The book is available on Amazon. Andrew Fritz is the CEO of Augment AI, who has more than 27 years of enterprise sales experience with every job from SDR to AE, and I'm sorry about the SDR part. Wow, that's hard. VP all the way to CRO. Pre-Augment, Andrew functioned as the CRO of a company called N3, which encompassed 2,000 outsourced sales professionals in job roles such as BDR, AE, SE, CSM, etc. N3 was subsequently acquired by Accenture, which then reverse integrated its sales operations practices under the N3 leadership team, leading Andrew to ultimately take over the whole portfolio of Accenture Song. And if you haven't heard of Accenture Song, go look it up. Massive, huge operation. When Andrew left Accenture Song in July of 2024, that practice had included over 15,000 agents operating on over 320 go-to-market motions per day. Andrew is also passionate about outcomes, customer advocacy, and the fact that the future of B2B sales will still be human, even in today's AI world. So looking forward to this. Martyn, let's kick it off. You've been researching, analyzing, and documenting customer buying journeys for decades now. So some people don't know. What really is a customer buying journey, and why is it important for organizations to understand theirs?
Well, thanks, Stu. That's a foundational question, and you're right. This is something that I've been looking at for 25 years when we first started to talk to customers about how they buy. Thankfully, one of our customers 27 years ago said, I don't get why our customers aren't buying. Could you go talk to them? So we went and talked to them, and they told us why they weren't buying. That started me down a path of talking to customers about how they buy. Not necessarily why they buy, but how they buy and all that goes on. One of the things that quickly became clear, and we've seen this trend over the last decade, is that the tension between the sales process and the buying process has changed and changed massively. Gosh, when I was in sales way back, we're talking about the 80s and 90s here, customers were dependent on us, the salesperson, for information.
Right.
That we could control the timing. We were the conduit through which all information flowed between the company and our customers and prospects. The sales process was dominant in that twin between selling and buying. That has changed, and it's changed dramatically. Thanks mainly to technology, of course, the internet, customers no longer have to wait for salespeople to get information. In fact, two simple facts that really expand on this is that customers very rarely talk to a customer until they're 50 to 70% of the way through their buying journey, their buying process. And here's another little factoid, 90% of all that goes on inside the buying process, there is no salesperson involved. So salespeople typically only touch the prospect at certain times. So the buying journey is what customers do when they're left alone. Customers do it with or without a salesperson. They're going through their own journey, which is often a journey of learning, working out what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. Multiple people get involved. Many things happen. And that is what we call the buying journey. The good thing is it's mappable For a particular market, when selling a particular product, you can map out that buying journey and predict who's going to get involved, what their agendas are going to be, what the concerns are going to be. You can start to look at what's going to happen. So in bottom line, the buying journey is the process that buyers go through when they buy, with or without a salesperson, and it now dictates the timing and the cadence of what's going on. You no longer can pull a customer through your sales process. That is old thinking. You've got to guide the customer through their buying journey.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And,
Also,
Andrew, I mean, given the context of that and all these massive changes, what kinds of changes have you seen in the enterprise decision-making process in B2B environments? And specifically, again, thinking about it from the buyer's world perspective.
yeah, absolutely. And first, let me start by thanking both of you for inviting me here. Really thrilled to be here. One tiny edit, you promoted me a little bit in the introduction. I was the head of outsourced sales for Accenture Song, not the entirety of Accenture Song. My old boss, Tristan,
That's
might look askance at that little note. So I just want to correct the record before.
Correction noted.
Yeah. So enterprise decision-making in B2B, I mean, look, it's a time of tremendous change. Now, some of these tremors were seen, as Martyn said, I think decades ago. You know, the role of the salesperson as the primary educator has been under fire for a couple of decades now. The advent of AI, you know, in the last 8 to 10 years has really sped this up. I think that one of the things that's happened is we're at this time of incredible velocity. I know we all see new news articles every day with constant change in the software ranks. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, I'm sure. But at this time of incredible velocity, at a time when it's easier to send an email, to create a document, to force things through to another step in the sales cycle, the only thing that's slowing down right now are sales cycles. Sales cycles are actually getting longer by a third to a half from where they were even just a few years ago. And we have a pretty strong thesis on why that is. And I think it goes to some of the points that Martyn was making. Certainly, this notion that the buyers don't even connect with the sellers until 70% of the way of the decision cycle is absolutely what I've found as well. Part of the reason, though, I think, is that there are far more stakeholders than ever before. You know, back in the day, I think we all got the impression, especially from Hollywood and other sources, that if we did a really great job in a sales pitch, we could get the decision maker, hand them a pen, and they would sign it right there. Those days are long gone, if in fact they ever really existed outside of a used car lot. And now we're in a place where the ACV of 10 grand and above typically will have 3 to 7 stakeholders right out of the gate. And as you take that up in deal size, the numbers go up accordingly. We'll talk through some stories of this a little bit later, but with all those new stakeholders come new learning styles, new decision parameters, and new political realities for each of those stakeholders within their own organization. I think that what Martyn said is really insightful. Sales reps who don't pay attention to that buyer's journey and that buyer map are really going to be behind the times, because now it's possible to pay attention to it with a far greater degree of fidelity than has ever been true before. I myself am thrilled about this progress. And we're going to the point where we're even mapping not just the map, but all the archetypes involved in the process. And we're really doing a lot of work to what we call mind the gap. If you remember your London tube stops, and think about what happens in between the meetings and what happens behind the doors that you're not invited into. And if you can get into a position where you actually assist those moments, you actually can change both the sales cycle of the deal, shortening it, and also the conversion rate accordingly. So I think it's a really exciting time. I also think not enough people are paying attention to this dynamic shift. And I'm so glad that Martyn wrote this book long ago that I could learn from. And I'm excited to be talking to you guys about it today.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a couple of key things there that just really popped out, right? Velocity. We're doing a lot more things a lot more quickly, but yet somehow deal cycles are continuing to slow down, right? So, you know, it sort of strikes me that what we're doing is we're automating bad process or augmenting bad process with AI. So that's great. So, and in that whole context, Martyn, you also mentioned that the customer is going to do this themselves, right? Like they're going to go through their own buying journey regardless of what they do. So, in other words, something about the salesperson has got to change. They can't just continue to be a pitcher, a seller, you know, an influencer, cajoler, whatever you want to call it. So how is a salesperson supposed to navigate this new world?
It's a great question. Of course, it's key to success in today's world. And I'm going to go to Andrew's Mind the Gap. It's all about the gap. It's the gap between what salespeople are doing, what buyers are doing. And that gap has widened to become a chasm that many people are falling into. The whole notion of sales process, we've got to just forget sales process. Now, I'm a process guy, so that kind of sends shudders down my spine there that we're going to give up on process. We're not going to give up on process. The process we've got to focus on is the buying process. Now, here's an interesting thing. When we talk to customers about what's going on in their buying process, they totally understand what a salesperson is offering, and they understand the value of that offering. They wouldn't be talking to that salesperson if they didn't. And yet, what is the sales process all about? And what are we equipping and enabling salespeople to? Tell them about the offering, prove the ROI. That is not the problem. That is not where things get hung up. They understand the product. They understand the ROI, or they wouldn't be talking to you. So you're already in the ballpark. You're not on first base yet, but you're in the ballpark. Now, what about getting to first base, second base, third base? That's all about navigating the customer through their buying journey. There's a huge, maybe subtle difference between sales process, buying process. What's going on in the buying process? Andrew said it. Many people are getting involved, different agendas, different things happening. That's what we've got to help customers with. In some ways, it's a misnomer to say the buying process, because customers are not actually focused on buying. They're focused on using. So when they're going through their buying journey, they're not talking about, how are we going to how are we going to issue a purchase order and how are we going to negotiate? They're talking about how are we going to be successful utilizing this product or service? Who's going to have to get involved? Change management is a huge issue, no matter how big the change is. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? That's what they're talking about. That's what they're getting hung up on. That's the gap. That's the opportunity. If salespeople start to get involved in that, help guide their customers through the buying journey, help them, let them know who's going to get involved, let them know what the concerns are going to be, help them with things like change management. It's not about pitching and proving your product. It's about helping the customer buy. We call that an outside-in approach. Really understanding the customer, riding with the customer through all of those activities, right through their buying journey, adding value as you go along, differentiating yourself by adding value as you go along. So to answer your question, kind of in summary there, the role of the salesperson today is navigating and guiding the customer through their buying journey.
Beautiful. And Andrew, I want to go to you on this one a little bit too. Same sort of question, but it struck me with what you both said just now is that there's literally legions of people now involved. And all of these people have different agendas. They have different value drivers, different things they need to take care of. They have different personality styles. All of that stuff. And that changes as they move through the buying journey. So this is starting to sound like a 4-dimensional Rubik's Cube, like really, really difficult. So given this complexity, same question, how is the salesperson supposed to navigate all this?
Yeah, well, first, let me go back to the point that Martyn made, because I think it's so vital and something that doesn't get discussed enough. The finish line for the seller might be the signature, but the finish line for the buyer, that's really just the starting block for the buyer.
Yeah.
They want to know that this thing is going to be successful. They're interested in coming into their review 6, 9, 12 months down the road and being able to pound their chest and say, I made a great decision on this company. Here's the proof why. So often, we don't pay a lot of attention to the baton passes that occur. Now, of course, today we're talking about within the stakeholder group, but there's vital baton passes to consider between sales and customer success as well, that the systems we're going to talk about later actually impact. But that said, how does the seller really impact this? I think it starts, I'm going to go back to my previous little joke about Hollywood. I think we've too long watched these movies and shows that would give us the impression that the funniest, most attractive guy in the room who's very aggressive is going to be able to sort of bulldoze their way through any objection and get a decision done right there. And what I've found as a guy who, routinely looked over 15,000 agents' shoulders around the world on 320 go-to-markets a day in my role at Accenture, is that those aren't the real superpowers that the top real ninja level sellers have. The top sellers that I've ever seen and that I've had the privilege of working with on large deals are characterized across the board by insatiable curiosity, generosity in their collaboration, and tireless advocacy for the customers themselves. This is what allows them to make it outside in, to Martyn's point. They get into the buyer's shoes, figure out what needs to be done for that. Now, it's, I made this point a little bit before. Let me make it even stronger. The most important seller in a deal is not the salesperson. It is the champion on the customer side. They're the ones doing all the selling. They have to make it through all these gates. They have to convince gatekeepers on their side. The seller will never even get a chance to talk to those folks. I'll tell you a story from early in my time at N3. I was chasing a very large deal with a household name technology company. And we got to a place very quickly where we realized we had something big on our hands. And my champion on the other side realized that his particular political standing and the ability to move things through the gates in the company wasn't as strong as a friend of his, who was actually in a totally different department, but who had the right political skills and hygiene and organization to make it through gates quickly. And we knew we had a clock on us. And so what he did was he paired us off, and we would do 2 daily calls every day. We would talk through in the morning what meetings were coming up, and then in the afternoon what had happened and what was ready the next day. And all the way through, my job was essentially to be his caddy, to come in, get him the right club at the right time, and talk to him to do action. And that meant sometimes building PowerPoint slides, sometimes it meant tweaking an Excel model, sometimes it meant tweaking a Word document. In the end, I attended maybe 10% of the total meetings that occurred in getting this deal over the line, and about a fifth of the negotiations. And through that process, we went through 14 different gatekeepers over 3 weeks for a $32 million deal involving 275 agents launching simultaneously in 5 major regions and 12 languages around the world. We did this in 3 weeks. And in that process, we had to negotiate with the global C-suite members, all of their power dynamics, all their content needs, all their sacred cows, and what their motivating factors were. And if I hadn't had that co-pilot sitting within that organization doing the selling for me, and if I hadn't done a great job assisting him, we never would have made it to the end. The other interesting thing about that deal, which is vital, I think, for today's world post-COVID, is that deal was a purely inside sales deal. I had literally never met any of the players involved when we got the first call, and I never met them before the contract was signed, exactly 5 weeks after the first call for $32 million. I didn't need to, because I had the right partnership inside that we could do things virtually. And if I got them the right things at the right time, things moved along. Now that in those days took a lot of manual effort on my part, right? I was doing things at all hours of the day and night. The good news is that in the age of AI, a lot more assistance is provided to produce those types of things as long as you're paying attention. You have to have a discipline about this. At Augment, we call this total listening. Our construct is effectively that we need to be paying attention at all times to both the stakeholders we get access to and what is said about the other stakeholders, so that we can provide them with the right assistance to get through their learning gates all the way through. Again, it's not about a transaction, no matter how big. $32 million is a wonderful win. Anyone would agree, particularly for an inside deal. But that was really just a proof of concept to build a much larger relationship. And every deal is. Your real goal in the end is the durable relationship between the parties. And you don't get there unless you take on their own needs and priorities all the way through. So I think in the age of AI, we're at a place where you actually can get assistance to be the caddy for your partner on the deal and all of their stakeholders. You just have to forget the myopic commitment to just managing the sales cycle and move past that into the buyer's journey and the decision process. That's the essential urgent construct.
I'd really like to dive into that a little bit, especially on the help from AI part, right? So I've been following sales and AI or AI and sales, for quite a long time. And last year I did a little bit of research with, my help, Jarvis, and found out that there were at least 400 apps out there that claim to be AI for sales. This year, the number, according to my buddy Jarvis, is that it's around 800 or more. So why on earth did you create a new one?
Yeah. I get asked that question a lot. And honestly, I'm kind of curious as to whether Jarvis is hallucinating there, because honestly, every day I hear about new ones. I bet the number is actually in the thousands. We should go check it with a couple other sources and see. But look, the reality is what we discovered and what we're sort of excited to be leading on is that while there are a huge proliferation of new applications every single day, they're focused on sales cycle management. They're focused on non-productive time. They're focused on getting emails out. They're focused on maybe a forecast update, but usually a top-down forecast update, not a first-party intelligence-driven one. But certainly everything again and again from the supplier's standpoint, not a greater engagement level from the customer, being able to assist them, learning who they are from a stakeholder basis. And this is fascinating to me because we had all these paradigms that existed before. You would have think we would have evolved past this. When account-based marketing first showed up on the scene and you had all these great ideas about how to work with a specific company, that was a leap forward. Then there was persona-based marketing where you thought through titles and realized, here's what kind of packet of information this title needs. Well, in the age of AI, you can get beyond both those things to individual-based marketing. You can actually start to learn who these people are even in a B2B process, not just as an ad spun up on Instagram, but actually in a big data construct where you're doing a 7-figure deal. You can learn who these people are and what is needed to assist them. That's why we think the time is here for what we call a relationship operating system. This isn't just sales cycle management. It's AI assistance for both sides. And frankly, just to make it even more complicated, to your fourth dimension construct, for all the sides, because in many of these large deals, it's not even just the supplier and the customer in the room. It's also ISVs, VARs, consultants, SIs. And you know what? No one has ever built a proper system for keeping accountability from all those parties and assisting them through their gates. We think the time is now for that. AI allows us to do this. The compute power is astounding. The velocity is astounding. Why aren't we putting it to work for the customers as well as the suppliers?
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, the future of sales is now. It's happening. It's there. So I'd like to hear actually from both of you on this. And Martyn, I'll start with you. But I'm hearing these major changes, right? And there's a sense of urgency, almost panic, but definitely urgency that's building in my mind. That I'm not seeing a lot of organizations making any kind of quantum shift here, right? So there's an urgency to adapt to this new reality. What should organizations do today? What's the first thing that you would tell them that they should do today, organizations and or salespeople?
Well, you're right. There is a sense of urgency. And the sense of urgency is not driven because of AI, although AI is going to enable you to get to where you need to get to very solidly. The sense of urgency should be there because buyers have changed how they buy and sellers have not. We are still using selling approaches that go back to the 80s and 90s. And to Andrew's point, we're paving the old donkey carts. So we're using wonderful technology to essentially automate our old processes that, quite frankly, are not just old, they just don't work because buyers don't buy that way anymore. You cannot take a buyer through a sales process. You've got to support them through their buying journey. So given that, to answer your question, what should people do? Job number one is map the buying journey. Understand what the customer is really doing, not what you imagine or would like them to do while you're selling. That's still inside out. Go outside in. Really find out what's going on in that buying journey. Who gets involved? When do they get involved? What are their concerns? What are their motivations? How do they make decisions? What do they do? Where do they go? That ecosystem that Andrew talked about, map that out. And as I said earlier, the good news is for a particular market, buying a particular product, you can map out that buying journey. You can predict what's going to happen. If you find that it's all over the place, I will argue it's more than one market. So right. For a particular market, in fact, we define a market that way. A market is a selection, a set of customers that buy in a similar way. So you can map out the buying journey. Now, that takes some time because you're going to find out what really is going on, not what you imagine would like to go on, what's really all the things that are going on. Map out the buying journey. With that now, and I use the GPS analogy, that is now your base map. You now have a map of what's going to go on. And incidentally, people may say, well, it's not linear. Well, in fact, what we find is customers jump around. They get through the buying journey, they find they're missing something, they loop back. Now, that's a gap. That's something that we could have helped them with, not miss. We could have straightened that out for them. So if you look like it's non-linear, that's customers jumping around, and that's opportunity for us. So with the base map, there's three things that we need to now focus on. First thing, with every engagement, when we're selling, the first question is, with any map, you start off with, where are we? That's why when you look at the map, it says you are here. The first thing, where are we? Where are we? That means where is the customer in their buying journey? Not where are you in your sales process. That doesn't matter at all. What matters is where is the customer in their buying journey? And that dictates optimal selling activities. If you don't know where the customer is in their buying journey, you are flying blind. Just like you are here. You've no idea where you are. So the first thing is, where are you? Where is the customer in their buying journey? Second question, how are we doing? So in any journey, where are you? You are here. Now, how are we doing? Right? Are we running out of fuel? Are we making the time we thought? So how are we doing is, what's the customer doing? How are they progressing through their buying journey? What have they done so far? How have they done it? So second thing, how are we doing? Third thing is, based on that, where are we going? What's the best thing we can now do to move forward? So those are the three questions. Where are we? How are we doing? Where are we going? Now that can be very sophisticated, but this is where AI comes in. AI can really help navigate you through that journey. So you can answer those questions both accurately and with insight about where the customer is in their buying journey, what they're doing, and how can we best help and support them move forward. So kind of to answer your question, I think there is an urgency to move forward, map the buying journey, and then look at those three things with every opportunity. Where's the customer? How are they doing? How do we move them forward?
Andrew, thoughts? What should organizations do?
Yeah, no, look, first of all, I think Martyn said it best. All I'm going to end up doing is supporting the point he made by telling you how I think you start to map the buyer journey, because I think that that's really the only thing that could stand expansion of what he said. It was brilliant. Look, how do you start to map the buyer's journey? You have to take advantage of the richest data source you've got, which is the first party intelligence that comes from the interactions between your customers and your sellers. People aren't doing enough with this. People are, in some cases, afraid of it, afraid of regulatory pressures. I can tell you that I think the market is past that at this point. If you're not actually taking advantage of recording interactions between your customers and your sellers, you're really flying with two hands behind your back. Like it's not a good situation. If you do that, though, you've unlocked a whole new world of what's actually happening on both sides, and a world where you don't have the lens that has historically been true in sales, which is everything filtered through the rose-colored glasses and happy ears of the seller, who's very optimistic. He always has a belief. And look, I'm optimistic too. I've been in sales my whole career. I believe I can be an agent of change, and I can change no's into yeses for sure. And I found myself guilty of happy ears when I go back and watch my conversations on occasion. That's why I'm glad that AI is here to tell us with an unbiased way exactly what people said, to be able to go back over it and ferret out the gaps. Again, going back to my mind, the gaps, those little points, those points of friction within a call are so valuable. I think people get hung up talking about, what did a rep do well in the call? How did they present something? It was wonderful, so on and so forth. I'm completely uninterested in what they did well in a call most of the time. What I want to find out is, where was there a point of friction? If there was a point of friction where the customer pushed back on something even lightly, that was them giving you a view into their world, a view into their buyer's journey. And that was the part you need to really watch for. And those are things that you should encourage, not discourage. You don't want to discourage that. You want that to happen when you're in the room. If you don't, it'll happen when you're not in the room. And I can tell you, it's much harder to address it then when you weren't in the room. So the most important thing I think they can do is start to harvest this intelligence from the interactions that happen every day. Once you have that, there are incredible teams out there like mine who can help you figure out how to map it with Martyn's help and get this into a place that you can actually turn it into enablement for the reps every day. But you've got to begin by grabbing up that most valuable source of data, which is those interactions themselves.
Great first step. Absolutely agree. Great first step. Well, man, my head is blown, gentlemen. There's so much going on here, and there's so many other questions that I would love to delve into. One of you mentioned the word forecast, right? That's got to be a big part of this discussion. So I know there's a ton of things that we'd like to cover, but what I'd like to suggest is, audience, in the comments to this podcast, if there's anything that you would like this crew to address and answer and talk about, we'd be more than happy to do that. So please throw your comments in. and we will put it together, and we'll do another one and another one and another one, and we'll keep covering this stuff because we love it. So again, Andrew, Martyn, thank you for taking the time. Truly appreciate your insights. Awesome stuff. And we will see you all again in the not too distant future.
Great. Real pleasure.
Thank you, Stu.
Pleasure. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out and make a difference. Also, comments and shares are welcome. So thank you, and we'll see you at the next episode.